Welcome back to the sanctuary where the polish of the cover gives way to the pulse underneath, where the spotlight turns down just enough for truth to be heard. You are watching Turkish series Stars, the space that refuses to skim the surface and instead follows the ripples of what people feel but rarely say aloud. Tonight is not about premieres, scripts, or sparkling gowns. Tonight is a descent into the fragile crossroad where fatherhood, loss, and unadvertised loyalty meet like waves in a storm. Tonight is about Yaman, the surge that overtook his private world, and the quiet light that appeared in the form of Demet Özdemir. Before we step any further, anchor yourself to this community. Subscribe, leave your mark with a like to honor the delicate gravity of this story, and if you believe in keeping humane, independent storytelling alive, the join button is your way of keeping our lamps lit. Your support is what lets Turkish series Stars linger with the stories that matter. Now, take a breath with us as we move into the part of fame most never see, a father fighting for the rhythm of his life. In a city where cafe corners host secrets and studios echo with applause, a disquiet has begun to travel in whispers. No one is gossiping about ratings or endorsements. The murmurs curl around one man, Yaman. The rumor is not scandal in the tabloid sense. It is not about trivial turf wars or a camera's flash catching the wrong angle. It is the slow, heavy tremor of a legal question that reaches into the most guarded room of his heart. From voices close to the machinery of the courts, and from confidences shared by those who have seen the private the one past the performance, comes word that the past has stepped forward to argue with the present. His ex-wife, they say, has petitioned the court to re-examine custody arrangements concerning their child. To those untouched by this battlefield, it might sound procedural, an administrative shuffle. But to a father, it is a bell tolling in the bones. It suggests new parameters, edges drawn where there used to be open fields, proposals that could measure and ration the simplest rituals, breakfast chaos, laughter gathering in a sunlit kitchen, an ordinary walk turning into an epic because small hands reached for his. Every motion in court must bend to the best interests of the child, a principle so pure it crushes everything that tries to stand beside it. In practice, it strands parents in a stale purgatory of waiting, paperwork, and sleeplessness, where the future never sits still long enough to touch. No ruling has been carved into stone. But the air around feels electric with waiting. Friends say this limbo has carved quiet lines across his days, using the dull scalpel of anxiety to cut into hours that used to hold creative spark and steady ease. Imagine the weight. That a simple calendar could be remade by strangers who will never eat cereal in that kitchen, who will never tie shoes at the door, who will never know which cartoons live on that screen. The fear presses in with a unique cruelty, reshaping familiar rooms with unfamiliar emptiness. What if the map of his days is redrawn with fewer landmarks? What if the count of Sundays changes? It is precisely in this storm that another name has begun to float at the edge of the frame with a quiet, undeniable steadiness, Demet Özdemir. Their shared history is no secret. There was a time when the chapter seemed closed, the page turned, the book returned to the shelf labeled it was beautiful while it lasted. They moved forward, as people do, building new goals, keeping their balances, finding new steadiness. And yet, when the waters swelled around something shifted without fanfare and without a script. This was not a reunion staged for flashbulbs. It was a steady hand in the dark. The rumors are not fireworks, they're embers. Messages at late hours, not to stir a frenzy but to offer quiet, I'm here. Phone calls that do not need the crutch of constant words, because silence can be the most fluent language between two people who recognize the shape of the other's breath. Demet does not make speeches for public sympathy, nor does she drip hints into the algorithm. According to those who hover near the edges, she has offered something rarer than declarations, consistent presence. Calm conversations where the deepest fears can be placed on a table that no lens is allowed to see. Moments in tucked-away corners that aren't about secrecy for spectacle, but privacy as kindness. And yet, the heart likes to keep its small museums. The scents, the laughter, the patterns of old jokes, it all lingers like a photograph in a wallet. Are we seeing a new spark under old ash, fanned by adversity? Or is this a different story now, where love has cooled into a metal that does not break? Perhaps it is the kind of loyalty that doesn't need a label, a promise that does not need a ring. Those close to can describe a man always protective of his inner rooms and fiercely devoted to his child. When the tide rises and he feels the shore slip, he seems to recognize the value of one steady rope. He has, quietly, called Demet's support priceless. Consider the rarity of that choice. In an era when former partners so often perform their breakups or wage their battles in public arenas, Demet's quiet feels almost radical. She isn't trying to own the narrative. She is trying to hold a corner of it still, so it doesn't unravel. She is not writing captions. She is listening for a heartbeat. And the city, always hungry for the next answer, finds itself whispering, "Where does this lead?" The cynics insist that crisis closeness dissolves as soon as the papers are stamped and the adrenaline evaporates. The romantics counter that hardship turns a bright light on what matters most, and anything that survives that light often becomes unbreakable. Meanwhile, the internet keeps the engine humming. Some users call this maturity. A pair who learned each other's languages long ago, now speaking them without demanding applause. Others point to midnight calls and the warmth that refuses to dim, and ask, can a feeling that deep ever truly disappear, or does it simply learn a calmer rhythm? One truth is clear, the names Yaman and Demet Özdemir are being spoken together again, not by a publicist's plan, but because life pushed them into a moment that tests character. In these weeks, Can moves differently. He leans away from red carpets and toward quiet rooms. Strategy meetings blur into mornings when coffee goes cold and the mind refuses to rest. There are nights when the future slips in and out of focus like a fickle light, when he imagines a calendar missing markers that used to anchor him. In those hours, someone who remembers the version of him without applause, the man who burns toast, the man who forgets where he put the pen, the man who trades grand gestures for small joys, becomes a lifeline. Not a headline, a lifeline. And on the other side, the ex-wife remains silent. No official statements. Family law is made of closed doors and slow clocks, and this is no exception. The pace is deliberate, almost cruel in its patience. Every delay thickens the fog. Every rumor feels louder for lack of facts. But a gavel will travel down eventually, and when it does, it will draw a new map for everyone orbiting that child's world. Including Can, including the mother, including every grandparent, cousin, and friend who has stood watch from a respectful distance. The solidarity that Demet extends resists neat hashtags. It does not strut. It sustains. It does not announce. It protects. It reminds us that in a world addicted to angles and filters, the quiet things hold. She checks in, not to nudge a narrative, but to steady a heartbeat. She offers a brief amnesty from the expectation that a leading man must always be stone. And there, in those small sanctuaries, back tables, empty gardens, car rides where the city is just a hush, two people practice care like a craft, sanding down splinters and letting the grain show. What comes next is a question that hums under every comment section, a bass line under every whispered theory. Maybe proximity fades with the storm. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is the proof that what once dazzled can return as something warmer, steadier, less likely to burn the fingers that hold it. And maybe Demet's refusal to speak publicly is itself a vow, to let the real story be the one that matters most, a father looking at a doorway and wondering how often he'll get to see a small figure rush through it. Here at Turkish series Stars, we keep our eyes open, not to judge, but to witness. We know you have your own stories, your own rooms where decisions changed the shape of your days. Leave your thoughts, your measured hopes, and your gentle disagreements below. Subscribe if you haven't, press like if you can feel the weight of it, and if you believe this space should continue to hold the nuance that the feed often forgets, press join. It keeps us here, ready to hold the lens steady when the world starts spinning. Because this is not just a story about two famous people. It is a reminder of how fragile and resilient a heart can be at the same time. It is the way a calendar can be a prayer. It is the way a late-night call can be a bridge over black water. It is the way a person can show up without turning it into a performance. It's the way hope chooses ordinary disguises, another check-in, another ride home, another pause where breath steadies breath. We see Ken pulling into himself just enough to stay upright, and we see Demet stepping forward just enough to keep him from falling. We see the city pretending not to stare, and the fans pretending they're not counting clues, and the professionals pretending they already know what the ending will be. But endings are liars. Life prefers chapters. And the next chapter is waiting for a judge's pen and a private moment where a father learns what the shape of his next Sunday will be. Until then, there is a stubborn grace in the way they move. He holds his calm like a glass of water filled to the brim, walking carefully so none spills. She holds her silence like a promise that does not need translation. The cameras can look, the voices can buzz, the threads can multiply, but the only audience that matters right now is the face in the mirror and the voice inside it saying, "Do your best by the child. Do your best by your own heart. Do your best by the truth of what you can give." So we wait. We wait together, with patience that frays and hope that renews. We wait for a decision written in language no one wants to read but everyone must respect. We wait for a new routine to build itself out of mornings that still arrive and nights that still end. And in that waiting, the smallest gestures take on the largest meanings. A knock at a door. A shared coffee. A message without an agenda. A presence that does not need applause to matter. When the news arrives, and it will. We will be here at Turkish series stars, holding space for relief or for regrouping, for celebration or for steadying breaths. And if we are lucky, we will also be holding space for the kind of loyalty that keeps its voice low, that does not ask for stage lights, that stands at the edge of the frame and simply refuses to leave. Maybe it is friendship that learned how to be mature. Maybe it is love learning new clothes. Maybe it is only what it needs to be right now, a shelter. If this story found its way to your quieter places, don't forget to subscribe, to like, to ring the bell that lets you know when we are back with the next careful step forward. And if you believe in this kind of storytelling, the join button is your way of fueling it. This has been a special presentation by Turkish series stars. Take care of your loved ones. Take care of the bonds you cannot see. And remember the rule the algorithms will never understand: true loyalty whispers. 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 True loyalty whispers.